All right. So before we hit record, we kind of touched base, and this has become a conversation that I'm really excited about having because in my work and communicating with people, when I say, I rebuilt my sense of self-worth and self-value based off throwing a backpack on my back and carrying a hatchet in my hand and building things that I needed along an adventure, it they oftentimes look at me like I'm crazy. So the fact that you put those puzzle pieces together in the same sort of context that I have, this is going to be really exciting. And I want to talk about first what brought you from Australia over to Alaska. What was the inspiration
A dream, Mike. I'm so excited to be chatting with you, and I'd love to tell you about the dream. And I think it's so important that we all have dreams and goals. And as an Aussie girl who grew up skiing on our mountains, which I should call them hills, they're not quite as steep as the big mountains in the US. As a skier, I dreamed about going to Alaska. Alaska was a place that they put in all of the extreme ski and snowboard movies as the ultimate place to go to. They flew in helicopters and landed on top of these big mountain peaks and created these beautiful carving turns and left tracks down white powdery mountains. And as a skier, and probably any skier around the world, that can be the ultimate dream. And so as a young girl, I remember watching one of those movies with a few of my friends or staff members in my store at the time and saying, I'm going to do that one day. And they kind of went, yeah, right, Jen. Sure, gave me the challenge. And that was all I needed. If somebody tells me I can't do something, it just makes me want to do it more. And so I was so excited when all the puzzle pieces came together in order to travel to the US for a trade show in Vegas so I could do a bit of work, and then to travel up to Alaska to go heliboarding. I was riding a snowboard back then, and make that dream come true. That dream, that trip, that experience changed my life forever.
I've talked to a lot of people that their background is basically immigrating from foreign countries to America, and I get that same sort of context. It's like the dream that we have ultimately gives birth to the goals that we build. But I don't know if it's a foreign concept to the people here in America, but for some reason, those goals never become the identity. They become the motivation to live the experience of life. And I think that's something that's very freeing in building a mindful mind sort of mindset.
That's exactly so true. That originally it was a dream that brought me to the US, but what kept me coming back and what ended up getting me to stay here and become a resident and live here was a combination of a few things. One, it was the environment, those mountains, being outdoors in those mountains just made me feel something different that I'd never felt before. Those mountains were big, they were powerful, they were a challenge, and that was incredible. But the other thing was the lifestyle and the attitude of the people, and I think we get that when we travel around. Every country, nationality, we all have sort of different attitudes to life. And the attitude of somebody that lives in Alaska in this cold environment that's stormy, it's cold, the days are long, the days are short. Some of them don't have running water in the wintertime. They have to chop enough wood to stay warm in the winter. All of those sort of survival skills that these people that I met had really made them into the type of person that I wanted to be. I used to say, and I still do, that the women I met up in Alaska were so badass. I wanted to be badass too. And so I just wanted to spend more and more time there and learn about their lifestyle, their mindset, their attitudes in order to have that survival and love for life in the outdoors.
I take a lot of the conversations that we have and I reflect on them later, especially as I'm putting together an episode. And I find myself journaling a lot based off of the new perceptions and the new, thoughts that I encounter. And the more that I've looked at it and thought about that outside the box sort of, I got these goals, but they don't define me. They make the journey. I realize just how much when you're in survival mode and you're struggling to get through whatever scenario it may be, holding that goal there almost shines a light in a way that if you're on a trail at night, you turn on your flashlight, you can see where you're going. Well, when we get down in the trenches and we're really struggling, and that depression, that anxiety, and all the other things start to compact us, and they basically make the sky around us dark. It works as that flashlight, and I think that's one of the most beautiful things that over recent conversations I've really begun to understand that, when I got a hatchet in my hand and I'm trying to build a shelter, yeah, it's a survival tool for the moment, but it's also a survival tool within that mindset that can help us to move forward and ultimately truck through the night and find that next morning sky.
That is so true, Mike. And I was suffering a lot of depression at this time in my life when I had my first trip to Alaska. And that depression at times was really bad, and I felt like life wasn't worth living. And that was a really dark and heavy place to be. And trying to just survive in life was difficult. And I think after that first trip to Alaska and seeing these people have, you know real things that they had to survive in the environment, made me look outside of my mind drama and out into the real world and getting outdoors. And one of the things that I made a decision to do when I got back to Australia after that incredible trip to Alaska that changed my life, I got really depressed again. Uh, and I then had the strength to make a couple of really big decisions. I realized that the job that I was working wasn't my dream or my career that I wanted. It was actually what I thought my parents wanted me to do. I was following in my parents' footsteps. I was doing what they thought. I'd managed to build myself up. I had a house, I had a sports car, all the things that I thought would make me happy. And they just weren't. I was not happy at all. The only happiness I'd felt was when I was on that trip up in Alaska in such a long time. So I made some big decisions. I sold my business. It took me about a year and a half to actually sell that retail outlet. I sold my house. I sold the sports car. I cashed up, and I made the decision that I was going to fly over to the US and spend 12 months traveling around. And I decided that I'd seen these people living in RVs up in Alaska because the mountains are a long way away from the cities. And if you want to be in the mountains, you either need to camp or live in an RV. So I decided I was going to buy myself an RV. I flew to Seattle with my mountain bike in a box, and I rode my mountain bike up and down all the RV dealerships in Seattle, and I found myself my adventure mobile and the Coachman RV, and I bought that RV with the plan of spending a little bit more money than I wanted to originally, because I was a girl traveling on her own and I didn't want it to break down. But the original plan was to sell it and go back to Australia with some new adventures in my bucket. But what I didn't realize when I was making all these decisions was how impactful it was going to be driving an RV as a single girl from Seattle all the way up to Alaska and having this bucket list of things I wanted to do. I wanted to find places with no names. I wanted to see polar bears in the wild. I wanted to ski certain mountains or hike certain trails. I wanted to drive every road I could in Alaska because there's not that many. And as I started traveling and spending so much time by myself, I started discovering that if I was going to spend so much time by myself, I really needed to enjoy my own company. And every day when I got up and I would turn on my favorite tunes, on my radio and get into a positive mindset, I got to make my own decisions. Was I going to turn left? Was I going to turn right? What was the adventure that I wanted to do that day? And through that process, and it took months, and I'm not saying there weren't times of depression during that journey as well, but during that time, I learned what I loved, and I learned to make my own decisions, and I learned to enjoy my own company. These days I love spending time on my own. I enjoy, doing my crafts or my games, or going on my, incredible imagination journeys and things like that. And they're a lot more positive than they used to be. So sometimes we can have a goal and a dream and we can make it happen, but the universe really gives us the lessons in life that we actually you know needed, but didn't really
I,
know how to find.
I think that's really beautiful, actually, because, as I'm listening, I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of the depression and anxiety that we all deal with is rooted in the fact that we're trying to live someone else's journey that they lay out for us. And we do that because it's really uncomfortable to spend time alone, turn within, and discover our true calling. When I think about some of the people that I look up to throughout history, namely Daniel Boone, we look at the world and those anxieties about interacting with people and things that drive us away and put a label on it called social anxiety. Now he turned around and he had those same things, but he looked at it differently. And that's something that through turning inward and going through these adventures, I feel like we both built the same kind of context where that aggravation or that annoyance of dealing with so many people around us because we're trying to live that journey becomes the spark for adventure. It becomes the spark for self discovery. And I think it was a beautiful journey that he took. He was granted a founder of our country, and we all live and enjoy the rewards of that. But when you look deeper within that story, you find exactly that, a new context for facing all those things that we're trying to live up to, and understanding that we really don't have to. We can go through and just live our life if we're willing to face what is probably one of the most dangerous concepts internally about going in the wilderness, and that's the isolation, the sitting with yourself, the getting to know your thoughts, your ideas, the things that you enjoy, and wrapping your head around the fact that it's okay.
Yeah, great way to put it, relating it back to Daniel Boone. And I did feel like an explorer, and not just exploring the country, but exploring my own mind, my own self, and building my own self-confidence every step of the way.
And that's where, because actually I do a lot of side stuff for myself of actually going and kind of walking the trails that are still there and visiting things that are still there from his journey. So opening your heart to not only learning and discovering the facts and the historical events, but opening yourself up to the storytelling, putting yourself in those shoes. It really, I feel, opens up the door to that beautiful celebration of life that a lot of us shy away from because it's so scary, it's so difficult, or we just don't have the time throughout our day because we're chasing all these other things. If you're willing to put down, or even in your example, sell a business, step into the unknown, and just let yourself be, turn inward, as ultimately become the theme of where we're going with this conversation, is by turning inward, that strength gets to shine through. And that's not to say that throughout the course of these journeys that you take yourself on, there's not going to be danger, there's not going to be risk, there's not going to be unknown. I know I've faced my fair share of danger, risk, and unknown. And I'd like to hear a little bit about some of those more impactful kind of moments that you faced along the journey.
Yeah, the decision of leaving my life in Australia and coming to the US was definitely going outside my comfort zone. And you hear people like Tony Robbins and other coaches talk about getting outside your comfort zone and the benefits of doing that. And I really did go outside my comfort zone because I saw people in Alaska living outside their comfort zone. They were living in super cold temperatures, right? And I think that the other thing that happened during that journey of discovery, of traveling, of going places you've never been before, and going outdoors like you love to do, Mike, is it brings back our inner child. It brings back that curiosity of exploring and what's around the next corner and being curious. And so I really believe that having a curious mindset and having the courage to go outside your comfort zone, not just in location, but in temperature, in change, is so rewarding. And that's what makes us grow. And one of the lessons that I learned when I was up in Alaska was I went up there to go heliboarding, right, on a snowboard. And I remember getting in that helicopter. It's so exciting. The blades are turning and they call me Adrenogen, and they don't call me Adrenogen for nothing because I love that adrenaline rush. And of course, my heart was beating, and we fly through these majestic mountains and we land on top of this mountain. And we get out of the helicopter, and it is scary. It is so scary getting on top of one of these really big mountains. And then the helicopter takes off, and we are just left there in the quiet. Well, it was quiet outside, but I tell you what, my mind was very noisy. There's a lot of things going around in my brain, and I love to say, be careful what you wish for, because it might just happen. And if it does happen, how are you then going to react? In times past, if I had encountered something that was scary in my life, I had a tendency to have the flight response and to turn and run away. But there was no running away. That helicopter had taken off. There was no ride back down. I had no choice but to drop into this big steep mountain. And I put on my snowboard. My heart was pumping. I took some deep breaths, like I was trying to slow my heart rate down, and having to find that courage to overcome a huge fear of riding a big mountain. I'd never ridden a big mountain that big before. I was from Australia, and dropping in was one of the hardest things I'd ever done to that point. And I remember dropping in, doing one turn, and then going over the handlebars. My snowboard was too small for the deep snow. It was an Australian snowboard. And I tumbled, tumbled, tumbled. And for some lucky reason, maybe it's because I've got good balance, I landed back on my feet and I kept going. And I rode down and got to where the guide had stopped. He'd said, "Come down to me." And I made it to him, which was the goal. And I just burst into tears. And this guy, Jerry, he's still a friend of mine today, and he recalls this story. He remembers it very well because the emotion that I had from overcoming the fear to having a scary situation, but being okay and achieving that first run was so powerful. And those tears were not tears of sadness like my depression. They weren't tears of happiness. They were just tears of being so proud of myself for overcoming that fear and actually doing what I said I was going to do and not running away. And that was super, super powerful. And then the helicopter came and picked us up and we did it again. And I think that's one of the things that really helps us build confidence and gives us the fitness, the fear fitness, and the strength to do it again and again and again is we need to practice. And so after I'd spent, a week there and done these heli ski runs and overcome my fear again and again and again, all of a sudden it started becoming a little bit easier. And I really started to be proud of myself. And being proud of ourselves is such a powerful thing that builds our self-confidence. And I believe one of the best ways of doing that is overcoming a fear, finding that courage and doing it anyway, and then going, wow, I did it. I did it. That's awesome. Now I can do it again. And once I learned how to do that on the mountain, I was then able to come back into my life and use that same mindset in order to overcome other fears. And they can be anything from dealing with relationships to going live on Facebooks or speaking on a podcast with you, Mike.
Yeah, see, that's one thing that I encounter a lot when I get together with a group and take them hiking or do a one-on-one trip. You know, as the guide, you're always there trying to evaluate the situation and really help someone, provide, essentially providing the support for someone to live the experience. And a lot of the time when we get out, it is all those thoughts that are racing through their head is the first thing you got to battle. It's not about going up that first mountain peak or, that first animal encounter, the first night trying to acquire resources to make the night comfortable. It's that storytelling that's going on. It's the fear that you got to overcome. And once you start to grasp that, that's where you start to be able to then turn some attention to the physical aspect of the hike, going up the mountain or an extensive day of hiking. Say you got to get in about 10 miles to meet the day's goal. You got to kind of work them along, just essentially pushing it through and realizing, just like when you get off the helicopter, you're there, you got no other choice. In our case, when we're on the ground and we're on a trail, yeah, there's an option of turning around and going back, but 9 times out of 10, when you do that, it's a lot harder to go backwards. So you got to learn how to eliminate that story. But when you do that, it also opens up this space within your heart for creativity and for celebration of you did this, you achieved a moment of mastery, which is really when you're trying to rebuild that sense of self-worth and self-value. Having that moment of mastery, no matter where it comes from on a daily basis, is the foundation for it.
It really is. It really is. And that's why I love taking other people out on adventures and in the mountains like you, Mike, and guiding people around. And sometimes they think they're coming to learn how to fly a kite or learn how to snow kite or learn how to ski or do backcountry skills. But they learn more than just those skills. They really learn to find their confidence, to overcome their fears, and believe that they can do it. So as a coach and a guide, there's a lot more to it than just teaching people those skills. And I think the other thing that's important that I love to teach people is the safety aspect, because we can feel fear because we feel unsafe. It's not safe either physically or mentally to do that. And so having all the tools in our backpack, and I love your hatchet analogy, Mike. I use those same analogies because I'm always carrying a backpack full of tools. And when we're on the mountain, we're wearing an avalanche beacon. We've got a shovel, we've got a probe, we've got a first aid kit, we've got a spare puffy jacket, spare gloves, spare goggles, everything we would need if something went wrong. And it's really important to not just carry that stuff, but actually know how to use it. And I teach people about flow. And if I say flow, everybody's going to have some different meaning for flow. But for me, when I'm teaching people, I talk about flow as F for forecasting, and being able to forecast what the weather is going to do. That is our first point of making a smart decision based on safety. And we're not just looking at the forecast to see if it's sunny or if it's raining. We're actually looking for dangers in that forecast. Is there going to be a storm? Is there lightning coming in? Are the winds going to be too strong? Do we have heavy snowfall that is going to create a whiteout and we can't see anymore? So in terms of safety, forecasting is key, and not just forecasting the weather, but forecasting maybe the avalanche danger, maybe the thickness of the ice if we're on a frozen lake. Also forecasting our mental state. That is so important. How do we feel for that day? And are we ready? Are we ready for this adventure that we're about to go on? And sometimes forecasting our mental state can we can be so excited. As you can tell, I get very, very excited about doing something, achieving that goal. Sometimes I can be so excited that I don't see the red flags out there. Oh, there's a danger. Oh, that doesn't matter. Oh, I can overcome that. There's another red flag. Oh, no problem at all. It happens a lot, actually. The statistics show that males, it's called the human factor. And when you do your avalanche training, you learn about this human factor. And we might have planned on a certain weekend to, leave the wife and kids, and we're going to hike this mountain, and we've been planning it, and we've bought all this equipment, and we've maybe booked airfares to get there. So we really, really want to make this happen. And then we get there and there's some red flags. Maybe the avalanche danger is high. Maybe the weather's not right. Maybe, somebody's got some broken gear or isn't feeling well in your group. And we can tend to be so excited that we ignore those red flags. And so forecasting our mental state, not just our sadness, but also maybe overexcitement, can also be a red flag. And just coming back down to a level where we can evaluate everything is so important. Now, F was for forecasting. L is for location, and making sure that we've chosen the right location for our adventure. Are we overestimating our abilities and we've chosen to go on a big long hike that we don't have the fitness for? Do we need to choose a trail or choose a mountain that is within our abilities? When I'm teaching people to snow kite, are we choosing the right location for the wind direction? Some locations work on one direction, but when the wind's the opposite way, it doesn't work there and we have to go somewhere different. So choosing your location is so key. Once you get to your location, O is for observations. And if we can look around, get there and look around, even if it's somewhere you've been before, things change, right? The environment's always changing. I remember going to a beach to go kite surfing in Australia that was close to home. And over the winter, while I'd been overseas, some big storms had come in and they'd dredged all the sand away from this beach. And when I got to the beach, all of a sudden there's a cliff of sand, like a sand dune cliff, and there's nowhere to launch and land my kite. So even our most comfortable locations can change due to weather or environmental changes. So look around. What are your observations? What dangers or red flags? You might get to a location and there's an event on, and there's all these people competing. Maybe that's not the right trail for you to use this day. Maybe there's avalanche danger or water pooling on the frozen lake. We need to be super observant, and during that observation phase, having an entry and an exit plan. What happens if somebody gets hurt and we can't get back to where we started? What is our exit plan? Do we have a different route, or can we call in a helicopter? Do we have the insurance to cover the cost of that helicopter rescue? Making sure we have that entry and exit plan is key. And then the last letter in the word flow, right? I'll just recap it. It's forecasting, locations, observation, and the last one is wind and weather. And that is always changing. And I mean, I'm an amateur meteorologist. I love forecasting the wind and weather, but even the best weather forecasters get it wrong sometimes because our weather is so unpredictable. And so it's really important to check the weather when you get there, but constantly be checking, looking in the sky. Are there some storm clouds coming over, and all of a sudden that storm's going to hit hours earlier than they'd forecasted to do? And so always being observant, that really keeps us in the moment and keeps us present rather than having our mind on the goal, an hour ahead of our bodies. We really need to be present in that moment.
See, I love the way, because I do this a lot in my own work when I'm out with people, is I'll take the environment or the situation that we've signed up for, and I'll look at it as a way to become a teaching tool for life. And it really ties into the mindful aspect. And a lot of the time, the reaction is the thought, I had these labels and I had these preconceived notions of what this was going to be. We made up at the trailhead, and you're handing me this 45-pound backpack, and you're expecting me to carry this thing. And a lot of the time, my comment and response to that will be, if you think about all the emotional baggage that you're out here learning new ways to forget or to let go of and work through, that backpack that you can't see is so much heavier than the one that you're going to be carrying along the trail. That when you work all those different aspects into it for the word flow, it brings you on the other side this whole new toolbox that's going to help you to gain progress in life so that you're not just feeling like you're stuck all the time. You've always got some sort of psychological tool that you can pull out and rely on because you've had these things in your hand and you exercised the ability to learn and utilize those while doing the same thing for the stuff that you can't see. And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of it. And then, like I mentioned before, through the process, it opens up so much space within our mind and our heart that it's impossible to not become creative. And once that cup ends up becoming filled for ourselves and it overflows, we start finding all these amazing ways to share our experience through storytelling and through different facets. And I know that's something that you've done a lot in that arena as far as writing books. And I'd like to hear a little bit about not only the motivation and the experiences that have led to what you've already written, but what you're currently working on and the motivation behind that book.
Sure, I'd love to tell you about Gail. Now, Gail is the character in my children's book series, and Gail is actually based on myself, and Gail is named after strong wind, right? Gale force wind. And I decided to write a children's book series this year after I was actually diagnosed with some brain aneurysms. I was having headaches for about 5 months and really struggling to pinpoint what was causing these headaches. The doctors were getting it wrong. They were starting to feed me medications, which were making me feel depressed. And it was really difficult dealing with all that pain. And I advocated for myself and ended up taking myself to the emergency department and demanding that they do some more diagnostics. And they found some brain aneurysms. And that was just devastating, devastating to me for somebody that has so many goals and dreams and adventures and does extreme sports. Well, I mean, it would be devastating for anybody. And one of the reasons why it's devastating is because we start grieving our life that we thought it was going to, what we thought it was going to look like this. And all of a sudden it may not look like that. And I had multiple brain surgeries in February, and that was some of the scariest times of my life, even scarier than standing on that mountain up in Alaska. But I used all of those same tools to help me find the courage to be brave and be grateful, be so grateful for this experience that I was going through. And one of the reasons why I'm grateful for getting brain surgery, I mean, it's hard to even believe I'm saying that, but I am. I'm so grateful for this experience because it's really made me look at my life and question what's important, what isn't, and also what do I still want to achieve before my time on this planet is done. And one of the things I wanted to achieve was telling my stories. I'm so lucky to have lived such a life of adventure and had uh, so many adventures and so many lessons and stories. And I felt like I hadn't shared them. Someone said to me once, Jenny, is there more knowledge in a library or a graveyard? Now, if we think about that, to be honest with you, there's way more knowledge in a graveyard because people are not sharing their knowledge before they go. And so that was the motivation I needed to write my first children's book. And it's called Gail and the Red Kite of Courage. And it talks about me as a little girl when my brother was diagnosed with cancer. and he was told, he was only 9 years old, I was 11. We were told that he had to have his leg amputated. And this was a devastating time for our whole family. And my mum and my brother had to actually go to a whole nother city in order to have the cancer treatment. And so it was my dad and I at home by ourselves, and I was helping to look after my dad, and you know, having to sort of play the woman of the house at a very early age. And I got very, very depressed and very sad. And it wasn't until my brother actually got me a kite for my birthday. You know, he'd come home, he was doing much better, and he got me a kite for my birthday. And I was really scared. I wasn't much of an outdoors girl. I was one of those little girls that wore skirts. And all of a sudden I had this kite, and I went outside and wanted to fly this kite. And my dad helped me. My dad was a sailor, and so he helped me fly that kite. And as soon as I launched that kite, my spirits lifted. And that was a changing, pivotal moment in my life where I found joy. I found joy doing a simple action of flying a kite. And the story of Gail tells us how Gail actually becomes best friends with the wind. All of a sudden she had this fear of the wind, and then all of a sudden she sees this tree waving out her window to come outside and play. And Gail has fun flying the kite. She then gets taken to a kite festival by her grandmother. And I'm dedicating this children's book to my grand. She turns 100 next week. I'm so excited. So I'm dedicating this book to her, and the vision of getting to this kite festival with my grandmother and seeing what looked like 100 kites in the sky symbolizes that, and seeing all of these other kids and people flying big colorful kites in the shape of sea creatures and animals and things really opened up my eyes. And there's this beautiful illustration in the book of my brother and I flying kites, and that's the first time you see his character standing there with crutches and one legs, and we're both flying this kite. And I was, you know, Gail says, you know, I'm proud of my brother and I'm proud of myself for overcoming our struggles in life and finding the courage to get outside. And Gail finds all these new friends that loves flying kites too. And that is a true story about my brother and I, but in a children's story with beautiful illustrations for about the ages of kids 6 to 10 years old. In the back of the book, there's fun facts about wind and kites. So it's not only entertaining and a story, but it's educational as well, because I love sharing my passion for wind and weather with people. So these kids are going to learn fun facts about the wind. Then there's some great wind jokes. I mean, wind is the funniest thing out there. So we talk, have some jokes about the wind, and then there's also a QR code that takes people to the instructions on how to make their own kite. And I've been doing that over the past year. I've been going to schools, elementary schools, and teaching kids about wind and weather, and then making kites with them and getting to see them fly these kites. And they work indoors or outdoors. You can just run around and create your own wind. And seeing the kids' faces and the joy is just so rewarding. I remember up in Alaska this year, I taught an elementary school class, and then I was at the supermarket and a lady came up to me. She said, "Are you the lady that taught the kids about kites today?" I said, "Of course." I had this hoodie on that says "I love kites" on the front, so it wasn't hard to find me. And she said, "I have to tell you a story. My daughter has been really struggling in life, and I picked her up from school every day this week, and she's been in tears. She's really, really depressed. But today I picked her up and she ran up to the car with a huge smile on her face, and she was flying a kite. 'Mummy, Mummy, I'm flying a kite.'" And it gave the mother so much joy. She had to come and share that with me. And I was so grateful to hear that. It made everything worth it. And it really showed me again how much joy a kite can bring to somebody. And so that is the sort of reasoning behind my first book in the series, and the second and third book are already in draft form. And again, they're teaching life lessons using the kite as an analogy, and I'm so excited to have these coming out on Amazon in the next month or so.
I love the story in there because, yeah, we go through the struggles, we learn a lesson, and then we have the ability to decide to either craft that lesson into a relatable story that's going to help someone else along the way, which is really what the living human experience is about, or we can hide from it and let it eat us alive. So every chance that I get to hear a story where the struggles become a celebration, I think is a beautiful thing. So I really am grateful for the opportunity to celebrate not only the life and struggles of the journey with you, but ultimately that beautiful rainbow at the end. This has been a beautiful conversation, and I'm really grateful that we had the opportunity to do so. So I want to thank you for joining me today, and hopefully we can link up again soon and meet back up.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and it's funny you say that, because on the last page of the book, it has Gail flying a kite with a huge rainbow, and it says a gust of wind can turn a sadness storm into a rainbow of hope and happiness. So I'll end it there and say thank you so much for having me, Mike. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope our conversation, the stories I've told, is going to inspire and help somebody else out there with their challenges and struggles in life.
I'm sure that they will. Before I let you go, I gotta give you the opportunity to let people know where they can get in touch with you and get a hold of these books and everything else you got going on and coming up.
Thank you so much. Well, my name's Jennie Milton. I'm from Australia, but my nickname has always been Adrenaline Jen, shortened to Adrenogen. And that's where you're going to find me, at Adrenogen on Instagram, Adrenogen on Facebook, and adrenogen.com is my website. If you'd like to find out about the book, there's a new website up called gailandtheredkite.com. And you'll be able to find all the information about myself. If you'd like me to come and talk at an event, I would love to come and motivate and empower your team or listeners. And I hope that my lessons in life can be shared with little kids with my book, to adults, and to anybody out there who really wants to touch base with me. And I'd love to teach you to fly a kite. Let's go fly a kite.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. That was awesome. Good job.